The sneaker male is the type of man who isn't a Chad, but he punches well above his weight in the world of seduction and dating. He doesn't have outstanding fitness as a man, but with determination to get something out of this life, he develops a strategy to create a backdoor to sex and reproduction, taking inspiration from female tactics to create some powerful tools for himself. In nature, sneaker males are those males who are typically smaller or just weaker than the males who hold down territory and are competitive. These sneakers use an alternative strategy of hanging around these dominant males, presenting themselves as harmless, and in many cases, outright mimicking a female. It's all part of a strategy to get close to and breed with females who are around this dominant male, or in the case of say fish, to slip in and fertilize their freshly laid eggs. The dominant male can thus be made a cuckold, devoting time and resources to the survival and success of the young of another male unknowingly. The success rate of the sneaker male strategy varies by species, but considering that the sneaker is scamming another male into taking up his parental duties, any success is a big win since it is low investment. Typically, the success rate is around 5 to 15%. In other words, that is the percentage of young in a species that are actually sired by sneakers who don't have to invest. In a study on peacock blennies, found that sneaker males would do their best to mimic the behavior of the females and be drawn towards the nests of large healthy males to mingle with the females and wait for them to start spawning before releasing their sperm over the yet to be fertilized eggs. The success rate of peacock blenny sneakers is estimated to be about 10 to 20%, when literally all they do is pretend to be female and coom on the eggs. Within the species called side-blotched lizards, the orange-throated males are aggressive in expanding their territory and keep many females, while the blue-throated males hold less territory and females but devote more resources to defending what they have. And the sneaker males of this species are the yellow-throats, whose appearance mimics the females. And by the way, these roles are proven to be changeable to a degree by altering testosterone levels. The yellow-throat sneaker lizards typically do not attempt to sneak on the females of the heavily mate-guarding blue-throats, and instead will go into the expansive territory of the orange-throats, where it is relatively easy to get away with mating with the females. Sneaker males might not have to put in long-term effort to look after their young, but they do have to work for every individual mating, and generally can't mate with any member of a dominant male's harem as much as the dominant male can. So it is theorized that sneaker males devote more resources into winning the sperm wars, such as by producing more sperm that is also more mobile. And this trait of sneakers has been observed in fish such as the Atlantic salmon, mammals such as the brown rat and wild boar, reptiles like the side-blotched lizards, and birds like the red jungle fowl, the ancestors of modern chickens. In a study done on rose bitterlings, a type of fish, it was found that sperm released into the water by sneaker males before the female even laid her eggs was more effective at fertilization than sperm released by territorial males directly onto the eggs. So some species of fish, the territorial males can sense when sneaker sperm is floating in his nest, and will fan it away with his fins, even though he will also be fanning away a lot of his own sperm, and doesn't want to compete directly with sneaker sperm. In animals that fertilize internally, such as humans, there are other methods for removing a competitor's sperm from near the eggs. In the black-winged damselfly, for instance, the penis is designed for effectively removing sperm from previous matings while in the process of copulation. And in some species, mating will even end with some sort of plug being pushed into the female as a countermeasure against further matings by other males. In humans, the penis has a more prominent glands and coronal ridge and overall larger size compared to the body size than other primates. This has led to theorizing that the penis is designed, especially in humans, to have a shovel effect, scooping out the sperm of rival males during copulation. And you can imagine the trade-off involved between penis size and the ability to maintain an intact penis across a lifetime, with the way that, for instance, chimps fight, gripping and tearing flesh apart with their bare hands. Our relatively larger size might suggest that we more commonly use a sneaker strategy for mating than other related species. Researchers have actually used artificial models to simulate sex with a vagina that already has sperm inside, and it was found that this shovel effect was effective across different vagina and penis models. And we might expect that sneaker males will have larger penises to create more of this shovel effect to maximize the results of every sexual opportunity. Well, as humans have become more intelligent, it would seem that sneaker strategies have become more varied and successful, especially in more recent decades, as I'll get into. For most of history, an average or even below penis size was considered an ideal because men didn't have this kind of competition on their minds so much. You might say they deluded themselves into thinking that it isn't important to have an effective shovel, but on the other hand, there really were fewer avenues where sneaker type behavior would be tolerated. The consequences were typically severe if a sneaker was caught sneaking, especially when he wasn't masculine and didn't offer much value to the tribe as a whole. Consider this also, in modern times, a lot of average people have been poor for generations, which means they haven't had the chance to breed selectively and they gradually became dysgenic. And more recently, the elites have also become dysgenic as they prioritize wealth and connections over good material when choosing partners, whereas in the past, they would have taken more advantage of their ability to choose from the litter, and the elites of old tended to have quite strong genes. But now, dysgenics are taking over both sides of the class divide, and sometimes a dysgenic, inkwell tier guy will end up having a big dick, which could prove beneficial when he employs sneaker strategies against Chad, shoving out his sperm with all that girth and impregnating Chad's girl with his own seed before fading back into the sidelines where he hides in plain sight. So my theory is that as sneaker strategies become more common, which they definitely are, so too will big and more shovel-shaped penises, but only time will tell. Now, before we carry on and start to really talk about human sneakers, I want to clear up a certain distinction. A Chad and an alpha male are not the same thing. A Chad will have looks, size, athleticism, and intelligence, but it's his nature that will still be a little depraved and unproductive. This is the kind of man who will flex at every opportunity to try and get more female attention, and to fuck as many big girls as he can get his hands on. An alpha, on the other hand, has all the same advantages as a regular Chad, but with a much more productive nature. An alpha is less likely to risk a disease or inseminating a mid-tier girl over 1,000 random hookups, and more likely to follow the old adage of just going for the best genes that you can get for the sake of having strong and healthy children. An alpha is less of a fuckboy and more willing to cooperate with other men to build a stronger community. And he doesn't flex. If anything, he downplays his own strength, since that's usually the smarter play, since so many other men will feel envious and want to take him down. But even despite the lack of flexing, he still has women vying for his attention from which to choose a partner. So it comes down to nature. You could just think of it like this. An alpha is like a German shepherd, while a regular Chad is like a pit bull. Both can do damage if they need to, but they just have different programming, with one being a lot less predictable and less productive because of his nature. Chad is almost the whole package, except that his mind is programmed poorly. He takes his gifts and steers towards hedonism. So, in humans, the sneaker male is more cunning, more adaptive, and quite possibly more sexually successful than in any other species. The sneaker strategy allows an unattractive man to date up by a few points. A 4 can date a 6, and a 6 can date an 8, and even a 3 won't be an inkwell as a sneaker. The human sneaker male doesn't simply attempt to look harmless or mimic the appearance of females to keep another man's guard down. No, he studies and copies female dating strategies and flips the script on them to use for his own success. For starters, the friend zone is actually a position that sneaker males choose to enter into as one of these adapted female strategies. The female tactic of keeping a bunch of guy friends is not really about other girls being too much drama or any other excuse. In fact, the excuses are from back in the day. These days, women don't feel the need to come up with any excuse, it's just normalized. She's just one of the guys in the male friend group, and it doesn't really raise much questions with people anymore. For a woman, keeping a large number of guy friends is about sussing out the true value of these men, including the more hidden qualities that might take time to see, but also it is to keep track of the current status of their relationships. So she just waits and watches, and if one of the guys she is interested in seems to be on the rocks with his girl, she can start dropping suggestions to the whole friend group that they really aren't a good fit and slyly badmouthing this guy's girlfriend, saying that she did this or she said that. Eventually, she might manage to tear them apart, and that's when she jumps in on this guy when he is newly single and trying to figure out what he wants to do now, and may be a little emotionally vulnerable. To outsiders, it can seem as if the whole thing happened organically, so to speak, but the facts are that she steered the results and landed a relationship with this high-value guy using subterfuge. Now just swap the genders in this whole scenario and you'll understand the core strategy of the sneaker male. The friend zone is not really relationship purgatory, and he's not really just there to be an emotional tampon when she wants to cry about her boyfriend doing this or that to upset her. I mean, he is a beta orbiter, sure, but he is busy planting and watering the seeds of discontent himself, while he positions himself as the soft landing for her. And if the boyfriend has something to say about him, if he gets his back up and wants to do a little mate guarding because he's starting to see what's going on, the sneaker has the ear of her and her friend group, and his outrage will be painted as him being too controlling. These days, you are seen as weird if you try to mate guard your girl, like you need to share your girl, bro. Society doesn't expect you to share your toothbrush, but it does expect you to share your girl. And by the way, if you want to argue against me about how the friend zone works and say that men and women can be just friends, how about you introduce me to your girlfriend, to your sister, and to your mom, and I'll show you something cool. So just like in other species, the human sneaker loves to hang around Chad. Firstly, because by imitating the female desire to be around strong males, they run into a lot of females. But in humans, it's more so because he wishes to study both sides of the relationship he is considering sneaking on. Note how often a woman will cheat on her man with his best friend, or his cousin, brother, or father, all of whom can put themselves in a strong position to put the relationship into a rough patch by cozying up to the boyfriend. They can push him into drinking more and becoming overweight. They can plant doubts in his head about her. they can emotionally manipulate him into breaking his commitments with her. A sneaker can realistically do a lot of damage from inside Chad's inner circle, maybe even more than from his girl's friend zone, and often he'll just do both, sneaking for both sides. And even if the couple he's sneaking on work it out and get back together again, a lot could happen during that rough patch, and Chad could end up unknowingly raising the sneaker male's child. Both men and women are prone to a funny sort of delusion about this sort of thing, by the way. Women are prone to thinking that they can pass off a child that looks nothing like her man as being his, and men are actually prone to falling for it. Yeah, I hear ya, it can never happen to me, right? Yeah. Now I know, you might be thinking that it's just not that easy to grief a relationship between a high quality man and his girl. But even Superman has his kryptonite, and no mortal man doesn't slip up from time to time. A Chad has a lot of advantages in this world, no doubt, but it's not like bad things don't happen to him. Just having good genes doesn't make you immune to all the economic games played by those in power who don't want competition. And the sneaker male knows, for instance, that high income and status can hook a woman, but what she really wants to see is constant progress, or she will start to lose attraction. Even if her man is making $200K at a job that he's comfortably settled into, she still loses attraction when he doesn't keep progressing. And if he loses his job and can't get back to that level quickly, he's likely to get sneaked on. You see, when it comes to stealing another man's girl, sneaker males have a distinct advantage. As a beta male orbiter, he isn't nearly as well known to the girl he's after as the man she is with, so he can pretend to be something that he isn't, and make like he is the man that her boyfriend failed to be in her eyes, at least for the moment. This is also why sneakers love to make use of virtue signaling. Since he is not under a microscope like her boyfriend, he only has to signal that he is pro-women or that he supports other ethnicities. Which, by the way, is something that women like because it signals that you want to create competition, which allows weaker genes to be weeded out. Now, while I was looking at all these studies, I noticed that some of these researchers like to make a distinction for something they call leisure sex. But from an evolutionary perspective, between a man and a woman, there is no such thing. Psychologically, every encounter comes with the weight of possible impregnation. I mean, if leisure sex was real, then IncÄls everywhere would be able to secure some pity sex from some sweetheart slut. If leisure sex was real, people wouldn't mock free love hippies and multiple men sharing a girlfriend situations. If leisure sex was real, women wouldn't be lying about their body count, or feel compelled to tell their family that the new bad boy in their life is just a friend. If leisure sex is real, then bro, I'm gonna fuck your girl. But don't get mad because I'll be wearing a rubber. Sneaker brand condoms, bro. I've been rubbing the tip on a belt sander. You see, quite contrary to this notion of leisure sex, in animal studies, it's the sneaker males who often use the most coercive tactics to secure mating. In fact, the term coercive male is often used interchangeably with sneaker male, and sometimes also parasite male. They generally aren't being actively selected by females, so they will apply pressure in some manner to get the female to submit to mating, such as through constant harassment, which can decrease the female's fitness and lead to her death if it goes on too long for multiple sneakers. This is part of the reason why females typically prefer physically dominant males in the first place, so that she isn't constantly being punished for not letting coercive males run a train on her. So for females not being heavily mate guarded by a territorial male, it quickly becomes a dilemma between giving in and allowing the sneaker a shot at fertilizing her, or continuing to suffer whatever punishment she is receiving until the dominant male notices and chases the sneakers off. And by humans, the sneaker male will seek ways to apply leverage to both his target female and her boyfriend. The workplace is a great example because the sneaker male is the most aggressive about getting into a position of power and authority. You don't see naturally dominant men chasing authoritative positions nearly as hard because they just don't need them as a part of their sexual strategy. Whatever else people say about sneakers, let it be known that a sneaker will grind for years and claw for position when he determines that he needs to, no matter how long it takes. It's always sneaker males fighting to become mods on Discord servers, or to obtain the behind-the-scenes jobs on different streaming platforms where they can twist the arms of the streamers, or managerial type roles in different workplaces, anywhere that they can start applying leverage to the women that they are given authority over. Some might refer to this kind of behavior that sneakers exhibit when they feel like they're in a powerful position, using terms like white knights or super simps, but the truth is, it just works. If it didn't work, there wouldn't be so many laws on the books about using positions of power or authority to get sex. And by the way, these laws can always be worked around, using subtle language and inferences which allow both parties to somewhat save face in front of others. And at a certain point of sophistication, it is simply a relationship, even if it is all based around a simple transaction where leverage is being applied. In other words, coercion. Sneakers do it because it works, and many women just trying to get ahead in their careers have succumbed to the advances coming from the sneaker power trip. And if you want to look a little outside the box for a second, among savvy sneaker males, one of the most in-demand lines of work is to be running an in vitro fertilization clinic. There have been a large number of cases where the head of these clinics were found injecting scores of women with his own seed in place of their husbands. This breed of sneaker male finds a way to reproduce on an industrial scale, and again, he does it by gaining a position of authority. The party scene is a favorite of sneaker males. There have been many studies on the effects of alcohol when it comes to attraction, and the results are favorable for a beta orbiter who knows what he is doing. For instance, with alcohol, when someone is ugly, it becomes less noticeable, and because of this, a less attractive male gets his chance to create quick attraction without his looks getting in the way. He just has to present himself as having many desirable qualities to a drunk party girl, and he does like to target this party girl type of woman specifically because he has the insight to read into her likely situation. You see, often, this type of girl does have a boyfriend, who she has convinced to not be so controlling as to not let her go out to these types of places where there is alcohol, physical contact, and a large amount of horny men. Party girls also delude themselves into thinking that it is really only about having a fun night out, and not even a little bit about playing the field. And then here comes Mr. High Value Charming Man, at least as far as she can tell when she can't even sit down straight. And then this sneaker takes center stage of her internal conflict to turn up some emotions and spark her interest. This method is similar to a tactic that fat or just unattractive women use. They go out with their hot friends, and then will cock block any man who tries to go after their friends until they get some too, while the whole club is good and tipsy. In PUA circles, they used to call it jumping the grenade, when a guy goes for one of these girls for the night so that she stops causing problems for the rest of his friend group. But other times that doesn't happen, and they end up getting aggressive on some really drunk guy. Now, when an ugly or fat girl does this to a man, that's one thing, but men know that you can get into some serious trouble if you take a drunk girl to bed and she eventually has regrets. So the smart sneaker makes a few modifications while gender swapping this strategy, such as being, again, careful about his choice of target. Party girls really are one of the best options because they will be out night after night, so there is time to work at it, and the focus can be on getting her to emotionally cheat on her boyfriend first, before anything else. And this is a powerful tactic because of the second useful trait of alcohol. Any attraction that is built while under the influence of alcohol will last for about a week, and this is backed by studies. And it's subconscious. Even if she doesn't remember how that man got her to feel that way about him, she will feel that way, and she'll react more positively to him for about a week. And that's more than enough time to arrange something before the rose-colored glasses wear off. This general strategy is also the reason why beta male orbiters tend to have access to drugs. Anything that lowers inhibition will lay the framework for this kind of sneaker strategy. Girls who have partying habits will delude themselves into thinking that it's okay as long as they only cheat on their boyfriends emotionally. And a sneaker will jump on this opportunity to create attachment because she's wrong. Just think about it this way: if a girl has a partner, friends, and family that can console her and give her a sense of emotional connection, but instead of those people, she chooses to find security in a random beta male that she met at a party, what is that? That isn't behavior that just happens spontaneously. Rather, it means that this random beta male was being a watchful opportunist, a party goblin. And sneakers will create these kinds of opportunities for themselves by joining with females to promote and spread degeneracy. I mean, white girl wasted is now such a thing that in the UK, there is a non-negligible amount of girls in their late teens and 20s going to the emergency room with liver failure. They do this to themselves just to get into a position to play the field and end up emotionally entwined with party goblins. And again, if her boyfriend has something to say about this lifestyle, he needs to stop being so controlling. It's just a party with alcohol involved. What can a good boyfriend do when women and sneaker males are all telling him that he is a misogynist who needs to stop telling his girl what to do? These sneaker tactics are very effective, with self-reported infidelity by women increasing by about 15 to 30% in the last 40 years. That must be all that leisure sex that university studies keep talking about, and an overall less harsh societal view on cheating in recent decades that both increases the likelihood of more accurate self-reporting and of women being susceptible to these sneaker strategies. It's the sneaker man who takes her to bed and puts the idea in her head that if she cheats, it's her man's fault anyways. And yes, fuckboy Chads benefit from this trend too, but Chad isn't the one driving these changes. It's the sneaker males working their magic to turn from IncÄls into sex gods using alcohol and drugs and their powers of persuasion. They can take the easy route by just amplifying specific ideas and calling themselves male feminists. The sneaker male thrives on creating chaos in relationships, and he is in the lab with his fellow sneakers and the girls working on more tools every day. Whenever you see some confusing new trend in dating culture and how the media represents it, the first thing you should be asking is, how does this benefit sneaker males? If you think yours or someone else's girlfriend is being a drama queen, then the sneaker male is the drama king. And while he's busy being a so-called emotional tampon, he's actually taking in all that information to shapeshift into whatever kind of male she actually wants. It might not be real, but an illusion is enough. Like those guys who shave their eyebrows to make like they have dueling scars from being a super low inhibition Renaissance sword duelist. If Mr. Boyfriend loses his job and it puts a strain on the relationship, suddenly here's Mr. Sneaker making a show of how he is so generous and a good provider who can get her what she needs. And if Mr. Boyfriend has his own problems and isn't making himself very available, suddenly Mr. Sneaker is the friend who listens, and when the timing is right, the lover boy that fucks her too. He's always watching, and that one moment of weakness is all it takes for her boyfriend to end up raising his child once they get back together. And there will always be moments of weakness. Being a Chad or an alpha will mean a guy is a little more capable and better looking than a beta orbiter, but he can still be fucked when those in charge decide to mess with the economy. It's simply not set up for his benefit, and when he happens to be getting fucked out of a job, that's when his girl might have her moment of weakness. The sneaker pounce is a beta orbiter's most effective tactic for sowing his wild oats, and the sneaker male strategy is very adaptable overall. Some guys will pretend to be your friend just to get close to your girl, and this also applies to family members, where say a sneaker suddenly wants to be closer to his cousin, purely because this cousin has a girl in the picture, and once he has what he wanted, all that friendship or all that family bonding is suddenly over as fast as it started. If there is a guy who is suddenly going out of his way to be a hanger-on in your group, could be old friends, work buddies, family, whatever, and there's girls in it, there is not a lot of things that he could be other than a sneaker. The sneaker has a mission in mind, and often, you will only be able to piece it together after he succeeds. He will just work his sneaker magic through the group, and then have you scratching your head and feeling like the third wheel right after he dips with the girl. Even if you were never with this girl in that way at all, you'll still feel kinda dumped by it. And that feeling is when you know that you just got sneaked. Now, if you've somehow never heard of plate spinning, it is simply the concept of keeping multiple relationships and prospective relationships going at once. PUA type men like to focus on trying to create a plate spinning situation in a practitioner's life using that body of theory and methods. It's all part of the abundance mentality type of talk that the PUA coaches like to do. You just don't know you have abundance until you have a harem of plates to sweat over. But the truth is that beta orbiters were spinning plates long before the red pill PUA guys ever thought of it. They just orbit around tons of different women and chads while they do their thing, lurking and waiting for moments of weakness in relationships to strike. A sneaker isn't a player in the commonly understood sense, but he is there, and he uses this idea of leisure sex as an out to not have to sink too much resources into a fling with a girl who is just on the rocks with her boyfriend. When those PUA guys start giving advice about spinning plates, the most common and fair response is, how the hell am I supposed to invest all this time and resources into keeping all these plates spinning? Even just one is hard enough, and enough of a drain on a man's resources, especially for a guy who turned to the PUA coaches because he can't even get one on his own. You see, the truth is that plate spinning is originally a female technique. We just call it monkey branching nowadays, but their game is to always have the beginnings of a relationship with a few different men at once. Sneaker style plate spinning is very similar to this, as it is also fairly low investment to maintain, and things are kept warm with these different girls to wait for a good moment, while the PUA stuff aims to keep as many plates as possible in a hot or sexually active state. The red pill PUA tactics are actually just a collection of cherry-picked sneaker tactics. They are just those tactics that are easier to dress up nice and market as something that is basically adjacent with the self-improvement stuff. It's really just the tip of the iceberg though, with real sneakers embracing the dark side too. The sneaker male will burn down a happy relationship and use all kinds of different leverage, all just to steal Chad's girl. Now let's talk about nerds for a minute. For a long time, the common media portrayal of a nerd is someone who has something to offer, but is mistreated and bullied, and left lonely just because he isn't a Chad. Well, the real life truth is that most nerds are also sneakers. Many nerds do STEM maxing to try and get a chance with women down the road through money, but nerds are also the type to sow discord and grief relationships to create opportunities for themselves. The thing about nerds is that they are tryhards, and that is mostly because they just don't have the same advantages as chads. This can result in someone with a very specialized skill set that often doesn't include much dating experience, so they naturally fall into sneaker habits to try and make what they have work for them. And with nerds, these habits tend to be a lot more transparent than they think, and people catch on to them, which can result in a confrontation. See, in real life, chads and alphas don't typically bother with bullying very low status men. That's more of a strategy used by other low status men to try and lift themselves up. And again, unlike what the media portrayals will tell you, when nerds get bullied by jocks and popular guys, it is often because he was caught trying to pull something. Maybe he was playing the he said she said game to cause conflicts, or maybe he did something to try and destroy this Chad's future career. You see, jocks are just healthier and have better blood flow to their brains, so of course they are going to be smarter and catch on to nerds doing sneaker shit. They are also smarter than to actually do shit like swirlies, because it is too eye-catching and will get them in trouble. So it's mostly things like nipple twisters, slaps to the testicles, soccer kicks directly in the anus, tricep pinching, punching them in the part of the head that is covered with hair so bruises aren't visible, stomping on their toes, pouring water on their crotch so it looks like they pissed themselves, backhand slapping them in the face, ear twisting, knocking the window to them, cyberbullying, smacking them with soft cover books, anything that doesn't leave a bruise, or anything that is super visibly obvious basically. As I mentioned before, it is sneakers, and particularly nerds, who try the hardest to get into positions of power. I mean, how many Chad looking guys do you see in positions of power? A very good and clear example of this is Reddit mods, because you see how once they get that position, they start power tripping hard because they can't handle it. You see, one of the best things about team sports is that you learn to cooperate as a team, and a lot of Chads naturally get into sports because they are good at them, but a lot of nerds don't. And so when nerds get into a seat of power, things will start to go haywire immediately. They chase these positions out of an instinct to try and get some pussy through them, but they damage these communities by being uncooperative control freaks. So nerds are a type of sneaker male that often gets caught and punished. Generally, sneakers are actually very capable of a particular kind of teamwork when the opportunity presents, to virtue signal and break down another man in the presence of a woman. White knights don't just exist online, and it isn't as pathetic and useless as you may have been led to believe. Beta orbiters will put on their white knight armor in real life if they have an advantage like numbers. Let's say there's a couple having a dispute in public, and the man does or says something that these orbiters can latch onto with some kind of moral crusade. They will have the timing and natural instinct to start collectively tearing into him with a tirade of moral admonishments. And don't confuse sneaker behavior with simple passive aggression. A beta orbiter just has his own style of aggression because he is simply not Chad. He will fight in a situation where he has a physical advantage, or more commonly, numbers on his side. All it takes is one fumble with handling a woman in public, and a sneaker male might make the decision to make the situation much more emotionally charged. And then him and his fellow sneakers will launch an orbital bombardment on your ass. And the reason why he makes the situation much more emotionally charged than necessary is just so that he can afterwards move in to comfort the woman who he just tried so hard to drive into hysteria. He will take this chance to get in a lot of physical kino with the involved female if he can. And with so many sneakers around, it can turn into a dog pile of men trying to provide her some sort of comfort. They'll be rubbing her back and trying to hand feed her a bottle of water like the bell is about to ring for round 2. He will unleash an onslaught of fake outrage upon his carefully chosen enemies with such a force that they immediately feel isolated and disoriented, and he feeds off the energy of the situation he creates to fuel a fast alliance with the woman on the scene. He will escalate the apparent severity of the situation by doing things like calling campus security or encouraging her to press charges, or even gaslighting her into thinking that she was hit or is in shock, getting her as shook up as possible to then offer himself as a comfort blanket. And this is why beta orbiters so often gravitate towards feminism. It's a core strategy to tear down the other man and give himself an image of protector of morality and justice. And by the way, dogpiling women with these kinds of emotionally charged advances does wear down her defenses, because how many times can a girl say that she would rather feel unsafe or die than be with an unattractive man? 20 times? 30? Eventually, her resolve will wear in this dangerous reality as the sneaker man presents it to her. The sneaker man loves to plant the idea that she is never safe in a man's world, but of course, he's one of the good ones. Now, if you're still not convinced, let's visualize. Let's say you have a girl, right? And now you've got 10 beta male orbiters surrounding her, all working on convincing her that no matter what you did for her, you are still the bad guy. When 10 guys all fire at the same hoop, one is gonna score. And all 10 guys are gaslighting you and saying that you are a misogynistic control freak. And all the while, they don't have to invest in actively maintaining the relationship while you do. It's asymmetrical warfare. And like I keep saying, the sneaker male has countless avenues of attack. Everyone has a social media presence nowadays, and sneaker males, who are typically nerds, like to make multiple accounts pretending to be multiple people. They will then go after girls they know in real life, using these multiple accounts to pick apart her relationship and destroy her boyfriend's reputation. He can get his friends to take pictures with expensive cars to get her attention, and use that attention to create a moment of weakness where he can make his move. Now, an important thing to note is that the standard sneaker male approach is not direct, at least not at first. He always goes through others first, the boyfriend, family members, her friend group, clubs, jobs. Since women are usually disgusted by a beta male's physique and lack of social dominance, he can't just get closer to her directly. so instead he uses family and friends as an in. I mean, if being upfront about your intentions worked as a beta male, then you would see them going to yoga classes where they're the only guy instead of random chads. And you know, sometimes, maybe most of the time, the girl knows the sneakers game, but will feign ignorance about it to save face while she allows him to get close. This is because she knows she could use a backup man in case her boyfriend loses his job, especially with the rough job market we're all dealing with now. This is why when a man loses his job, his girl won't have much patience and will cheat on him soon, because she already has another man lined up for financial stability and won't have to bleed from her savings. For a girl like this, it doesn't really matter if a sneaker male doesn't really want to invest for the long haul, as long as he takes care of her right now until her real boyfriend gets a new job. In the workplace, sneaker male strategies basically all more or less follow the casting coach model. They fight hard to get into a position of influence and then leverage that for sex. In Hollywood, of course, this is very well documented and goes all the way back to the beginning of film. For example, Louise Brooks, who was a star back in the days of silent film, the 20s and 30s, mentioned in her autobiography that she felt pressured to engage in sexual relationships to progress her career. And when her star wasn't shining so bright anymore, she quickly turned to becoming an escort, which might suggest something about the mentality she developed to make it so far in Hollywood in the first place. Clara Bow was another popular actress from that era, and it was rumored that she had given into the casting couch, which was already a well-known practice in the industry. She did admit to having felt the pressure. Howard Hughes was a big player in Hollywood back in the day, and he was notorious for promising roles to young actresses in exchange for sexual favors. It was an open secret, as they call it. Hugh Hefner reportedly had the Playboy girls he kept around him on a $1,000 a week salary, and allegedly would bring them to his bed as he pleased, as well as pimp them out and set them up with sugar daddies. It was all very profitable and built more connections for him, like a snowball of pussy going down the mountain. He leveraged his influence to get sex with all these young women who were seeking money and stardom, no different than Hollywood. And of course, in more modern times, there's high-profile cases still in public memory. Dan Schneider is alleged to have used his leverage to get sexual gratification from a generation of Nickelodeon girls, and may have even impregnated one. Some critics have pointed to him excessively sexualizing the girls in the content that was produced, especially with regard to foot fetish type material, as a strong sign of, at the very least, what he had on his mind. But I will be fair and say that it's possible that he had directives handed down to him to lightly sexualize the girls for marketing purposes. And maybe he just happened to be too enthusiastic, or they had a fallout of some kind. Film producer Harvey Weinstein was the case that the Me Too movement was first built around. He has been accused of all manner of casting coach type activities spanning back decades and is now doing some real time. And you already know about Bill Cosby. He was also in a position where he had leverage over young aspiring women, and so he expected that they would keep quiet when he did his freaky thing. But of course, the tides of opportunity shift over the years and decades. And by the way, this channel isn't called Morality Simulator. I'm not here to grandstand about right and wrong, but just to give you a few juicy bones to chew on. I'd like to note also that a lot of times women will proactively throw themselves at these types of men because they already know that this is the practice in Hollywood and other industries, and will feel like they have to jump the line to get noticed. It's also true that oftentimes testimony can be bought off of girls who have a past sexual history with rich and influential men. So if someone wants to take him down, it's just part of the process of them digging through his past to build a seemingly overwhelming case against him. Therefore, it's hard to really know the truth, and I recognize that. But I will tell you that sneakers absolutely do work hard to gain access to the casting couch. And of course, just as I'm doing the finishing touches on this video, all the stuff about P. Diddy comes out. Diddy certainly rose high enough in the entertainment industry to occupy that gatekeeper casting couch role. And the same applies to virtually all workplaces on some level, as long as they hire women, of course. Video game development companies are definitely under heavy influence by sneaker males. While game dev teams do tend to be predominantly male, there are some abundantly female teams that work on certain games, and women occupy a lot of HR and middle management positions. These now infamous photos of employee teams are mostly from Ubisoft, while most of Ubisoft's upper management, like the CEO, are male. As I keep saying, a lot of people with the will to fight for a high-level position in such a company are sneakers. They do it so that they can influence hiring decisions and surround themselves with women, while the male employees get shuffled into the warehouse in the back like the animals they are. And what you will see coming out of these companies when sneakers are at the wheel is a lot of that go woke, go broke stuff. A lot of virtue signaling about how they are so cool with gays and all that gender stuff, and people of different ethnicities and women, while simultaneously portraying them all as oppressed minorities. Even if, say, a pair of lesbians appears normalized in the game world, there's a sort of implication where they want to appear as if they're being bold and breaking new ground for the sake of this group in the industry, even though they now now do it so often that it just comes off as obnoxious. Like bro, there's just not that many lesbians or black samurais. They do all this just to flex about what a great guy they are. And they will even encourage putting all this stuff in games, more so than they encourage actually making games that are fun and engaging. And then when critics point this out, they use that as free publicity and a chance to be seen as championing these groups some more. They really go out of their way to make it seem like the true issue is about the treatment and acceptance of these groups, even when it's super ham-fisted and disingenuous. So this sneaker strategy is to appear as a champion of morality for protecting some group that they actually couldn't really give a shit about. And the sneaker does this also to gain this group's support behind him, because a sneaker does need a lot of allies. It is another pillar of the sneaker strategy to use overwhelming numbers to win conflicts against those who would oppose him. So sneakers also naturally team up with other sneakers. Numbers are a force multiplier and an invaluable tool to the sneaker power of narrative manipulation. I mean, think about this. Go woke, go broke is real. It loses companies a lot of money, but they don't seem to care. And that's because they have so many allies, and they get more investment money by following the DEI stuff. Now, it isn't just virtue signaling strategies that sneakers employ while in high positions at companies. In recent years, some gaming and also tech companies have been getting criticized in the media for having a so-called frat boy culture where there is a lot of drinking parties, and that at these parties, sexual advances are made on female employees. It's all really just the same casting couch shit, as these female employees feel compelled to go to these parties for the sake of their careers. A sneaker has the power to craft a situation where him trying to fuck his coworkers is done under the veil of something like improving company morale. In late 2023, 5 Ubisoft executives were arrested on charges of sexual harassment and assault, which might be a takedown attempt for whatever reason. Or these men were being careless and were screwing these women while they were drunk instead of trying to build attachment at these parties first. If so, then these are some inexperienced or just autistic sneakers who are lacking faith in the process. But I mean, think about it. If a sneaker male has a high position in a company and he starts flexing on some female employees while the alcohol is flowing, and he has lots of allies backing him up because his position causes them to want to win his favor, and he's putting on the bleeding heart routine about how he's such a moral champion for this or that group, maybe attaching himself to feminism, maybe gays or other ethnic groups, then he will start to rope in some of these women at his office. It's not magic, it's just a magician's romance. And tech companies in general are a lot of the same. The actual jobs they give to these women can sometimes be quite cushy and unnecessary. The thing is, when a woman makes more than her man, it automatically puts stress on her attraction to him. So, by engaging in certain hiring practices, a sneaker male creates chances for himself to swoop in on a shaky relationship, and Mr. Executive Sneaker is already positioned as the backup man, and she starts to accept his free back rubs. The sneaker boss gets to let the money do the heavy lifting, as she now feels nagged by her relationship because she makes more than her boyfriend. And it's even worse if she and her boyfriend or husband are employed at the same company. Now the boss can exert his leverage on both of them and keep them in different departments. What can you do when your boss wants to have a drink with you and your wife, huh? What do you say when it's a tough economy and you might not land another job in your field? It's just a few drinks and your boss is even offering to pay. And a few days later, your girl tells you that she had a chat with the boss and that things will be better for you at the company and that she also loves you very much. What are you gonna do if you were too busy trying to get by that you haven't fucked your wife in months and now she has a baby bump? Maybe then the boss will pull some strings to give you a decent income while he moves on to the next fertile patch of soil. In a situation like today's, when there isn't enough good jobs being created and small businesses are being pushed into failure unless they have a very healthy cash flow. I mean, at this point, you could easily call it economic warfare coming from the top down. And in economic warfare, they don't just steal your company, they steal your girl too. How long will she stick with her poverty husband when she has offers from the CEO? A sneaker is observant, and he won't shy away from performing a hostile takeover if conditions are right. So, if you still question the power of the sneaker strategy, okay, I know you've been conditioned for a long time to believe in something else, the red pill or the blue pill maybe, but let me just ask you something. Why is it so hard to get legal paternity testing in Western countries? I mean, virtually all Western countries, including Turkey and plus Japan, you either have to get consent from both parties to do the testing, or a man with suspicions of infidelity has to convince a court to order a test. DNA testing kits to learn more about your genetic heritage is fine, even if allegedly it means having your genes cataloged, but finding out if the kid is yours or not using DNA is a privilege that is legally under lock and key. In France, for example, you face up to a year's imprisonment and a high fine for being caught doing an unauthorized paternity test. And even if you decide to do it anyways, or use some kind of loophole, the results will be of no consequence in court proceedings. The official reason given for why these laws are in place is that if paternity testing was freely allowed, it would cause the breakup of too many families. So in other words, France has an open secret. and so does the many other mostly Western countries that have such laws. Sneaker males are thus backed in their endeavors by government institutions, and it is therefore likely that some government officials have some personal investment in this. And also consider this. It is members of government that use your tax dollars, your resources to raise their children. The kids of politicians expect to suck up millions of tax dollars and bribes from the leveraging of positions. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of these kids in the United States alone. Leveraging the resources of others to mate successfully and to fund your children to go into many different high positions in society is high-level sneaker behavior that makes a cuck out of you and me. In Saudi Arabia, harems are legal, but they are really only obtainable by the ruling class. And I mean, if you just think about it for a minute, a bunch of men, each having many wives and dozens to hundreds of children, means that they not only put a massive resource burden on the people actually doing the productive work, but they also end up creating a ton of IncÄls just based on basic math. They take a bunch of women out of the dating pool using tax money, so now the gender ratio outside of the palaces becomes a sausage fest. It's harems for them, sausage for you. Or we could look at China, where a politician named Lai Xiaomin was caught using tax money to put up over 100 different girls in apartments. Who even needs 100 mistresses? Like at that point, he's just cucking taxpayers for sport. Lai did get the death penalty for embezzlement and a bunch of other things, but let's be honest, it's pretty doubtful that he's the only one doing this. He simply ran out of allies in the game for whatever reason and got thrown under the bus. Bottom line is, the oligarch gets 100 women, and you can't even afford one. And we can take this even deeper. The ruling class monopolizes on women and uses the blood and sweat of taxpayers to such an extent that virtually all people with roots in a given region, such as England, have the blood of various kings in them. This is despite the fact that royals tended to marry other royal and noble houses for political reasons. The fact of it is that kings and princes and dukes and lords and all that all kept many wives and mistresses and sired many bastards using all that taxation money, just as the ruling class does to this day. Having large families is a big part of their ability to maintain power, since they can have many family members working in many different professions at a high level, using that same tax money and connections that they gain through their office. Just look at Mitt Romney's family for a good modern example. His family is full of Mormons, and in the not so distant past, like Saudi Arabia, they allowed for men to marry multiple wives. But again, if you do some basic math, it really only means harems for those with influence and power in the community, while most other men were talked into accepting a life of an IncÄl slave, and toiled away, giving up their blood and sweat to help maintain the ability for these other men to support their harems and dozens of children. The Romneys no longer openly practice polygamy in the States, as it's been outlawed, but they already have tons of connections and wealth from doing it for generations. Even after the practice was officially discontinued in 1890, they kept it up for a while longer by moving to Mexico. And also, another reason why so many politicians are sneakers is that political theater is a sneaker's forte. To create chaos in a relationship before wedging himself into it is his bread and butter. So a sneaker founding a political dynasty that has its hands in everyone's business is just natural instinct. Now let's talk about divorce. There are many reasons given for divorce, but most of those reasons go back to infidelity. There's always sneakers lurking, and especially when a woman marries young, she will often be wondering, due to inexperience with adult relationships, about whether she actually has a good thing or not with this marriage, which can create an opening for sneakers. They will just craft a persona around her fantasy. And financial issues. That just means that she hopped when some IncÄl pretended to be rich. Too much conflict is also the same thing. See, every time a conflict shows up, she'll feel negged by the relationship. But the real issue, again, is when a sneaker notices and jumps on that. Negging, by the way, is a concept from PUA circles, which basically means providing a woman with usually subtle negative feedback to try and get her into a state of seeking your approval, which is obviously advantageous. And it's typically performed through backhand compliments, like telling her that her outfit is so dazzling that she doesn't have to worry about having anything interesting to say anymore. But the thing about negging is that it makes her vulnerable to seeking approval from more than just the man in front of her. So if she's getting negged randomly by all these conflicts in her relationship, then a sneaker, as long as he can maintain a certain status in her eyes, can swoop in and start drip feeding her approval. I mean, if you just started love bombing her, it would kind of crash the market. The point is to kind of get her hooked. And by the way, negging is originally a female technique, which women use to upgrade their genes, doing things like questioning Chad's sexuality when he doesn't go for her. And PUA has always been big on negging, but the thing is that they limit themselves compared to real sneakers, not wanting to get into the really dark stuff. And the techniques they do use get overused, and women start to catch on to them. I mean, most of them are just adapted female techniques. We're already at the point where the PUA tricks don't work so well anymore. And let's be honest, a lot of the guys who are big into PUA look dysgenic. They really are sneakers who just limit themselves. Another thing about sneakers, which shouldn't be that surprising, is that along with all this copying of female techniques, sneaker men do tend to come across as being somewhat feminine. And in the past, feminine men would often be isolated as some kind of abomination. So the question is now, What are you gonna do with this forbidden knowledge? I'll tell you what I'm gonna do.
Oh, I'm gonna take revenge on Chad by becoming a sneaker and a politician. Oh, pay for my kids, bitch!
And by the way, as the world becomes more poor, sneaker behavior will only become more common. It's a symptom of ghettoization. You see, when people are poor, it creates a lot of unstable homes because of the stress of never having enough resources. And the children from these homes come out unbalanced from not having enough enriching experiences. Extracurricular activities like team sports are good for developing young people's mindsets. And in their absence, people tend to turn out more toxic towards others. And things like team-based video games are not a good enough replacement, simply because there are no physical consequences for being toxic. No one can punch you through the screen. They also don't learn proper leadership skills because they don't really do cooperation and instead think that being a leader is purely about having power over others. That's why they virtue signal to gain leverage, because they simply don't care about anything but power, the power to use and abuse others. Another factor is that in areas where men are all living paycheck to paycheck, and they all have toxic personalities from the stuff I just talked about, the women tend to just hop around from one man to another because their hypergamous instincts keep getting triggered by men using sneaker tactics to poach each other's girls. And also, once in a while, someone gets lucky and makes a bunch of money from crime, so they hop on him for a month or so while the money lasts. The result of all this is that a lot of people aren't raising their own kids, either knowingly or unknowingly, but even if they don't know, they probably just don't feel that confident about it. And this causes them to invest even less than they could already spare being poor. And so the cycle continues and you get more sneakers, and everything becomes ghetto. So anyways, I have a Discord server called Oasted Lions. I'll drop an invite link from time to time, so be sure to stop in. In the world of dating, beware the man who holds a mirror to female tactics. Because with every success, so too comes an eternal adversary to try and break it down and remake it in his own image. And you will know that his name is Sneaker.